Welcome to Matters Financial, Geopolitical from Frontier. Thank you kindly for stopping by. I know everyone's very busy these days. I certainly am coming in here before 6, in part to avoid the traffic. My macro thoughts go back to an article in the New York Review of Books, which is headlined "How Robots and Algorithms Are Taking Over." Home thoughts. I'm reading Tim McIntosh Smith. He wrote this wonderful book called Travels with a Tangerine, and it's not that book I'm reading, it's another one, which is remarkable, and his scholarship is so interesting, how he melds ancient times with the present day. And he says this: "For Puritans of whatever faith, God is in the detail." And then another quote from him: "In fact, matter and particle physicists have more in common than one might suppose. Both tug, if in slightly different directions, at the knots which hold the cosmos together. Both look beyond the immediate world of sense perception into one where cause can only be deduced from effect. A quark is as invisible as an angel. Both are confronted by Manichean polarities, miracles and black magic, cheap energy versus total destruction." I thought that rather good. I came across this off the coast of Mozambique. Dolphins abound. And I remember the time we met dolphins on the way to Wasini Island. I'll put up that video. It was a long time ago now, 1,198 days ago. We went to Christmas when we didn't see any, and Ali was the navigator who took us to Wasini Island. I'll put up a photograph of him navigating his way there. We took Hannah to Atlantis for her birthday, and she kissed a dolphin, and still talking about it. The dolphin experience in Dubai is a little more manicured than Wasini, but Hannah loved it. I like the photography by this gentleman called Sebastião Salgado. I'll put up 2 photographs. One, if I recall, is of baobab trees in Madagascar, and the second has momentarily fallen from my mind, but you'll see it hopefully on your screen. Political reflections. This is a tweet from Jason. "Hillary's design team should have put girl boss and Hillary 2016 over this image as her logo. Design this up, peeps." And I have to agree with him. Russian fighter jet intercepts US Air Force reconnaissance plane over the Baltic Sea. I'd mentioned that yesterday. Washington has criticized Moscow after a Russian fighter jet intercepted a US reconnaissance flight in an unsafe and unprofessional move, in the latest of increasingly aggressive air operations by Moscow. According to the Pentagon, a US RC-135U plane was flying in international airspace north of Poland when a Russian Su-27 fighter intercepted the aircraft at a high rate of speed from the rear. The jet then passed twice more, using unsafe and unprofessional maneuvers in close proximity. And it remains extremely fraught, clearly. Saudis consider local force for Yemen fight as a 3-week-old air campaign against Houthi rebels in Yemen struggles to blunt their advance. The Saudi-led coalition supporting ousted Yemeni President Hadi is advancing plans for a possible ground force. The strategy was dealt a blow Friday when the Pakistani parliament rejected sending troops to aid the predominantly Sunni coalition in Yemen and instead declared that Pakistan should maintain neutrality in the Yemen conflict, rebuffing Saudi Arabia, a major donor to Pakistan. One senior Gulf diplomat told Bloomberg that the Saudi-led coalition has begun discussing how to recruit, train and equip a ground force that would be loyal to Yemen's ousted president's proxy force, which I suppose is sensible in the context that you don't really want to put your own boots on the ground in Yemen. A ground force comprised of Yemeni fighters could avoid much of these civilian casualties and begin to take back territory. Clearly, in conclusion, I said clearly the kingdom, and rightly in my opinion, not keen on putting its own boots on the ground. Foreign Affairs tweeted what Erdogan and Saudi Arabia's King Salman discussed behind closed doors, probably an invasion of Syria. Russia angers Israel as it lifts ban on delivering anti-missile system to Iran. Vladimir Putin has signed a decree enabling the delivery of S-300s, which the Kremlin had originally agreed 8 years ago, but then suspended it after strong objections from Washington and Tel Aviv. So Vladimir is still trying to poke his finger in Israel's and the US's eye. I'll put up a photograph of a crew operating an S-300 surface-to-air missile system taking part in a military exercise by the Baltic Fleet of the Russian Navy on February the 5th. International markets, interesting piece in Bloomberg, dollar in third bull run since the 1980s. The US dollar index, which tracks the currency's performance against 6 of its counterparts, has risen about 25% from May the 6th, 2014. As investors bet the US expansion will outpace its trading partners and the Fed soon will raise interest rates while other countries retain an easy stance. In 1985, the US and its allies were forced to band together in the so-called Plaza Accord to drive the dollar down, after the currency's appreciation led to an outburst of trade protectionism in America. I think we're going back to those sorts of levels. During the late 90s, and I remember this vividly because I was at the bank, a rising dollar helped trigger a worldwide financial crisis that devastated the economies of Thailand, the Thai baht crisis, South Korea, Russia, and Brazil. A rerun of the crisis conditions of 1998-1999 is unlikely, I'm not so sure, but there are areas of significant vulnerability, and indeed they are. According to this article, Malaysia, Chile, Turkey, where the currencies are at an all-time low, Russia and Venezuela are the most at risk. I agree with this comment from Jen. Short covering will continue to power the dollar higher. Predicts a 9% advance in the next 3 months to 96 cents per euro. The euro is last trading below 105.50 at 105.45. Dollar index is just shy of the 100 mark. Japanese yen had an interesting day yesterday, 119.77 trading now. Comments from Koichi Hamada, an economic advisor to Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He was speaking Monday on BS Fuji Television, described 120 against the dollar as considerably weak, and also said there's no need to force inflation to 2%. And people promptly bought the yen. Swissy 0.9775. Pound had a good bounce yesterday, now at 146.65. Everyone's waiting for the CPI number, expected at 0. Aussie dollar was above 0.76, now at 0.7586. India rupee 62.36. South Korean won 10.9750. The Rial 3.1238. Bearish the Rial, looking for 4. Egyptian pound 762.91, and the Rand lost trading at 12.13.19. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart. My target is 110. Euro dollar, I'll put up a 3-month chart. My target is 0.93. Euro touched 105.20 yesterday, not far off a 12-year low of 104.57, which was hit last month. It's fallen for 6 straight sessions. I think this will be a 7th. Greece was forced to deny a Financial Times report that Athens was preparing a debt default if it did not reach a deal with its creditors by the end of the month. German 2-year yields recorded their 5th straight weekly decline, touching a record low of minus 0.285% on Thursday. Germany's 8 years below zero for the first time on April the 9th. 10-year yield was at 0.16% on Monday after touching 0.139% last week. And listen to this, yields on Portuguese 2-year notes dropped to minus 0.004% on Thursday. And of course, it was only in May 2011 that the country was forced to turn to an international bailout because its borrowing costs had got out of reach. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the euro-yen, and I think the euro could fall off a cliff against the yen, frankly. Australia's $35 a tonne iron ore angst adds to RBA easing pressure. I think we'll see more easing out of the RBA. A prospect that an even bigger plunge in iron ore prices will wreck Australia's budget is adding to pressure for the central bank to cut interest rates further. I'll put up a 1-month chart of the Aussie dollar, and my target is in fact below 60. Gold last trading at 1196.10, so getting sold down below 1200. Crude oil, meanwhile, ticked up to $54.23, nearing the top of the range. Market is long here, and let's see how we behave. Ruble rally triggers mother of all squeezes as US funds pile in. It's been very painful. It's the mother of squeezes, and I don't think we're finished yet. Lewis Costa. I'll put up a 1-year chart of the dollar ruble, which had obviously got caught up in that currency and oil warfare that President Obama had waged against Putin. But I think now the market is more stable. Sub-Saharan Africa, we had the release of the Africa Pulse report from the World Bank. It's headlined "End of the Commodity Supercycle Weighs on Growth." Knocked down Sub-Saharan African growth to 4% from 4.5% in 2014, and that's below the 4.4% average annual growth rate of the past 2 decades. Well short of Africa's peak growth rates of 6.4% in the period 2002 to 2008. Excluding South Africa, the average growth for the rest of Sub-Saharan Africa is forecast to be around 4.7%. Despite strong headwinds, new challenges, Sub-Saharan Africa is still experiencing growth, and with challenges come opportunities. This is Maktar Diop. 36 African countries with expected terms of trade deterioration are home to 80% of the population and 70% of the economic activity in the region. That said, the continent's huge economic diversity is also mirrored in the impact of commodity price declines, even among oil producers. In Nigeria, for example, growth is expected to rebound in 2016. Cited calling out Angola, Equatorial Guinea, but saying on the other side, several oil importing countries such as Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, Senegal, growth is expected to remain strong. Interestingly, foreign direct investment inflows were subdued in 2014, reflecting slower growth in emerging markets and declining commodity prices. African countries continue to tap international bond markets to finance infrastructure projects. Cote d'Ivoire returned to the market this February. Ethiopia had a debut issue in December 2014. Although debt burdens remain generally manageable, debt to GDP ratios for countries with increased bond market access have picked up in recent years. Uncertainty about future global monetary conditions are an additional reason for caution. The big reason for caution for me is the woeful performance of African currencies. Revenues are being crushed. How, the servicing of this debt. I wish they'd all raised money in euros. Then they're citing persistent conflict in a number of areas, and recent violence by extremist groups such as Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab as posing security risks with the potential to undermine development gains. Also, the Ebola outbreak in Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone has highlighted pre-existing weaknesses in the health systems. And then I went through the entire report, and just to point out a few other things. Rise of new types of conflict, potential for disease epidemics are risks to the region's prospects. Initial terms of trade deterioration is estimated at 18.3% for the region, with declines of about 40% for oil exporting countries. Countries that stand to lose the most are the less diversified oil exporters such as Angola and the Republic of Congo. Other commodity exporters such as the DRC and Mauritania are also being negatively affected by lower prices for their main traded commodity. Oil accounts for around 90% of merchandise exports in Angola, Chad, Equatorial Guinea and Nigeria. They reckon, and I do as well, that the Naira remains overvalued in real effective terms, and I think Buhari needs to devalue more, so that the market has a chance then to bring it back to its equilibrium. Since the start of 2015, the Angolan kwanza has depreciated by more than 8% against the dollar, indicating that the central bank is allowing the currency to move more flexibly, following many years of sustaining a peg to the US dollar. Sovereign spreads for Angola, Gabon, Ghana, Nigeria have remained high, well above the peak of the 2013 taper tantrum. Do have a look at the report, because it's got a lot of good graphs, which I can't, of course, put on mine. Private consumption growth expected to slow in oil exporting countries as fiscal measures such as successive cuts in subsidies to alleviate budgetary pressures push fuel costs higher. Purchasing power is also expected to decline due to currency weakness, which will push up the cost of imports in local currency terms. Support from remittances will be muted, as remittance inflows in the region are projected to rise at a slower pace of 2.8% annually during 2015 to 2017, reflecting mainly a slowdown of remittances to Nigeria. That's interesting. And there's plenty of detail in this report. It's very good. Turning to South Africa, they're saying that South Africa's electricity crisis has very severe implications for growth prospects in the continent's second largest economy, according to the World Bank. The power shortage in South Africa is of great concern, and the lender is monitoring the situation closely. South African all-share is up 8.98% year-to-date and at a fresh record high. And that's been a phenomenal performance actually out of there, but I think that's a spillover from the performance in developed markets, and developed market traders then just look for something sexier and a more higher beta, and then they tend to pick up South Africa. I'll put up a photograph I took on November the 1st last year of the sunset in Johannesburg. Dollar Rand, we're now at 12.1360. I think we could go all the way up to 12.63. At least 6 shot in anti-government protest in Guinea. Protests against the timing of elections and what opposition figures say is targeted violence against them. Protesters barricaded streets, burned tyres overnight in neighbourhoods of the capital Conakry that are considered opposition strongholds. Security forces wearing shields and helmets moved in to clear the streets, firing tear gas as protesters threw stones. "We want President Alpha Condé to go," shouted one of the protesters. I'll put up some photographs I found from AFP Photo of anti-riot policemen clashing with opposition members in Conakry. 2 photographs that I found, and a photograph of Alpha Condé. And now take you back to something I wrote about events in Ouagadougou. And I wrote this in November 2014, and I said Ouagadougou's signal to sub-Saharan Africa, and this signal probably applies to Alpha Condé. The tipping point for the accelerated sequence of events was President Compaore's stacking parliament in order to extend the presidential term limit. There are plenty of African presidents who are seeking to pull off the same magic trick, and the events in Ouagadougou have surely put them on notice. Martin Aglo, a law student from Benin, told Reuters, "After the Arab Spring, this is the Black Spring." During the Arab Spring, now in the bleak midwinter, nearly all commentators spoke of how this North African wildfire could not leap the Sahara and head to sub-Saharan Africa. The reasons were that the state incumbents had a monopoly on the tools of violence and would bring overwhelming force and violence to bear. We need to ask ourselves, how many people can an incumbent shoot stone cold dead in such a situation? 100, 1,000, 10,000? This is another point. There is a threshold beyond which the incumbent can't go. Where that threshold lies will be discovered in the throes of the event. Therefore, the preeminent point to note is that protests in Burkina Faso achieved escape velocity. Overthrowing incumbents is all about acceleration, momentum, and speed. What's clear is that a very young, very informed, very connected African youth demographic, many characterize this as a demographic dividend, which for beautiful Blaise turned into a demographic terminator, is set to alter the existing equilibrium between the rulers and the subjects, and a rebalancing has begun. I don't know if Conde is paying any attention. I'll also put up another photograph I found from Ruble, several shot scores injured during clashes in Conakry. Egyptian pound steady as you like at 7.6337. Egyptian EGX 30 is up a marginal 0.45% year to date and has retreated 11.478% from its February 4th, 2015 closing high. Nigeria all shares now up 3.13% year to date and up a very strong 27.569% since the 13th of February. The Ghana Stock Exchange is down 1.64%. The Star tweeted this photograph, daughters post Instagram on Recce plane. This was the plane that was meant to leave the Recce squad, take the Recce squad up to Garissa, but it was in Mombasa. This photograph explains what it was doing there. And I concluded by tweeting Ian Bremner, referencing his article in Time magazine. And I said, this is where the rapid response helicopter was, clearly not in Garissa. He wrote an article in Time, 5 Facts Explain Terrorism in Kenya. Kenya suffers more than its fair share, he says. Secondly, problem of porous borders. Thirdly, weak security, as you can see from this photograph. 4, local tensions. And 5, recruiting made easy. KCB Group closed at a record all-time high for the second consecutive session. This time it's closed at 64. It's up 10.04% so far this year. If you haven't had a chance to look at my interview with Joshua, please have a look at it. And actually, immediately after that interview, I tweeted that my price target was 66. We're just now marginally below it. Kenya shilling, last trading at a 3-year low, obviously coming under pressure because of a strong dollar and the security situation. The Nairobi all shares up 5.46% in 2015, snapped a losing streak yesterday, which has seen the all share retreat 4.45% since closing at a record on the 25th of February. NSE 20 up a marginal 0.469%, snapped a losing streak which had seen the NSE 20 retreat 6.83% since March 2nd through yesterday's open. Equity turnover yesterday clocked 615.464 million, dominated by KCB, which closed at a record. South Africa, as I mentioned, is at a record. Nigeria has rebounded very strongly and have been outperforming, but I think some of those international investors are probably looking at Kenya again and took up some of the big cap stocks yesterday. Safaricom bounced 0.63%, regained the 16 level on just 1.185 million shares. What was interesting, there was absolutely nothing available for sale, which tells me that the price is underwritten here. Safaricom has surged 13.87% and has been the bull outlier at the Securities Exchange this year. KCB firmed 1.587% to set a record closing high of 64 for the second consecutive session. Traded shares as high as 65, which is an all-time high price sprint. High volume action, 3.178 million shares, plus 10.04% in 2015. And what's interesting is this has been a very powerful move in what has been a very soft, weak overall market, and I think that's a strong signal. Equity Bank, by contrast to KCB's 10.04% move higher in 2015, is actually down 4% over the same period. Centum strong, up 2.56%, and there were some positive announcements around the Two Rivers project last week. Jubilee popped 3.85% higher on very low volume, but it was EABL which surged 2.46% to close at 333. They issued a medium-term note program which was heavily oversubscribed, and it's closed at a 6-week closing high. They're doing a lot of work around the balance sheet, and I think it's being well received, bringing down debt, selling off non-core assets, and I think the market is taking that well, and that's why you've seen us move higher to 6-week highs. Once again, thank you. Appreciate it.